how do you instill the grit and perseverance in your kids? How do you balance, hey, I want to give them what I didn't have with, hey, I also want to give them what I have in terms of the grit?
Yeah, you're not kidding. That's a tough question. So I'll give you an example. So, back in the day, I saw my father in homeless shelters. So my family, on occasion, will go to a homeless shelter and donate food. Like that service. So it's like, yeah, my kids have a couple, they have resources, but let's not forget about the community. Let's think about what others don't have. So it's keeping them super humble, and hungry, right? Like humble and hungry is my main motivation. But, John Morgan, you can't teach hunger. And I've talked to him about that. And that's it's like, if you have a child who doesn't want to get after it, thankfully my kids evidence to me ambition, right? At least at an early age.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm Jonathan Hawkins. Really excited about today's guest. You've probably seen him because he's everywhere I look. This guy is there. We're going to talk about that. We've got Chris Earley, personal injury attorney from Massachusetts. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience what they need to know about you?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm really happy to be here. I appreciate you. I appreciate the good work you're putting out. I see you everywhere too. So I'm just trying to keep up with you. I'm really excited to talk with you. I'm an open book. I like to discuss this stuff because I'm a nerd with the business of law. So I'm excited to chop it up with you. I'm sure we're going to give some value to the audience. And I'm excited. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So cool. So tell us about your firm, how many attorneys, how many staff, where are you, how many locations, all that sort of stuff.
Sure. So we have 3 lawyers. We have 15 staff in total. We have 2 offices, one in Boston and one just south of Boston in Hingham, Massachusetts. And we're, a fast growing firm, trying to do good work for good people. And this thing, I'm blessed to say, keeps growing. So just super grateful, man.
So if I remember correctly, you started this firm straight out of law school, right?
Correct. Yeah. I was with a quasi partner for a very short time, maybe 6 months, I'd say. And that fizzled amicably. So I hung out a shingle, about 18 years ago. Time flies. But yeah, for pretty much my whole career, I've been self-employed and I never looked back. It's been quite a journey,
So,
as you know.
There are a lot of folks out there that some people started straight out of law school. Others feel like, hey, I want to get my sea legs underneath me first. How did you have the guts to go and just go?
I mean, when you're young and dumb, it's pretty easy because you don't know any better. So, I was 28, maybe 29, just turned 29 and just didn't have kids and wasn't married. And so I just had no clue, Jonathan. Like, I didn't know anything. I had never really gotten clerk experience in law school, didn't know anything. And so I do have a little bit of entrepreneurial blood. And so I just sort of leaned into that risk and uncertainty and just went for it. And brick by brick, you build, right? Just like I know you can relate. It's just like you build, you grow, some things catch fire and some things crash and burn, but you keep going up, right? And that's the idea. But just, a lot of good times, a lot of hard times growing this thing, but it's all been worth it. It's been a really good ride. So I'm excited to see where it takes me for sure.
Yeah, we'll get into some of this. Everybody talks about in law school, they don't teach you how to run a business. So most lawyers don't, they learn it on the job. I mean, I guess most business people sort of learn it on the job. So that, I understand that, but what's it like learning how to practice law on the job? Did you have mentors? Where did you go to learn it?
A lot of, I had a couple mentors. I availed myself of, local listservs, and I would pick the brain of, more experienced attorneys. Just a lot of, my first trial, Jonathan, I had no freaking idea. I don't think I'd ever even seen a trial. And I tried this personal injury case. I'll never forget the client, I remember her name. And the judge was very hard on me because I had no idea he was very unforgiving. This is almost 20 years ago, so hopefully judges are a little bit more tolerant. But man, it was hard. So that's an example, just learning on the job, right? Probably should have settled that case. If I know better, I would have. But you learn, you cut your teeth, you get punched in the face. I talk about that a lot. And so those things, they help you along. It was a lot of a lot of on the job training, just myself learning, but I felt like, personal injury was something I gravitated towards and just really liked it. I liked helping people. I liked negotiating. I liked dealing with the insurance industry on behalf of, injured people. And so a lot of just on the job learning, to be honest with you.
Did you always just do personal injury, or did you experiment with
That's
anything
it.
else?
No, that's it. I remember, I had a criminal case on my first cases, and I got so nervous. I think I threw up in the bathroom. I was just terrified of going to court and represent this man who's being charged criminally. And I thought, this isn't the right place for me. Like, I shouldn't be doing criminal work. And so I sort of just settled a few cases on the PI side and said, okay, this is a little more. I like this. Feels more. This is a better feeling. I like this more. So I kind of just fell into it, and took it from there.
And you start your own firm. You probably don't have many clients. Maybe you had a few, and then you do personal injury, and that takes 9 to 12 months before they start paying. How did you float it for the first year? How did you get through that?
So really kept the expenses low. I had a closet, man. It was a few $100 a month, literally. And that was a lot of money because I was broke as a joke. Just living in a studio apartment in downtown Boston, just not having anything, no access to cash. And so I remember I settled the case for $75,000. And I thought, holy smokes, this is a lot. This is a big deal. It's still a big deal today. But back then it was holy smokes, we're cooking with gas now. So a couple of those hits allowed me to just keep going, keep investing. I was advertising on Craigslist. I don't know if remember that from back in the day, but it was free. It's all day I was posting ads, just personal injury attorney. And just I look back, man, I did flyers. My wife and I back in the day, we flyered cars in a parking lot. And I just didn't care. I just had to do this grassroots marketing. And we could talk about that, at any point, in our call today, but that's still near and dear to my heart. Grassroots marketing is something I'm very fond of, and I always have been. I did that back in the day, but you got to hustle, man. I know when you're running a business, you got to get after it. Whether I'm 47 now, whether I'm 47 or 27, you have to you got to pay the bills. You make it happen. Hustle.
Yeah, you talk a lot about the hustle and the grit, and I'm with you 100%. And I would like to touch on your childhood and how you grew up, and I think that probably led a lot to it. But even the early part of your firm, the folks that have to hustle early on and really work, it sets you up for the rest of your life. For me, at least, I've always worked hard. I was not the best at really anything, and I had to outwork everybody. And I always felt like I could outwork anybody. And I think it helps me in all aspects of my life. And so probably, your childhood, let's talk about that, but then also how it led to, number one, I'm curious how it led you to be a lawyer, and then, the foundation that it provided you to help you build what you're building now.
I appreciate that. So I come from a family where there was addiction, homelessness, trauma. I was just at the Miami Trial Lawyers Conference last week speaking about this on stage. And I was talking about the need to share your story. So anyone that listens, whoever, when you're listening to this, I think this is a writer downer, share your story. So here's my story, right? My story is coming from a family saddled with tragedy, very sad stuff. And then I was my mother's first child to graduate college, then law school. I'm writing a book right now about getting over, about getting over trauma, dealing with it. You just said before, Jonathan, about outworking people, and you and I, man, I'm with you on that, because I'll outwork you. It's you may have a better SAT score, may have a higher grade point, but you and I know in the real world, that doesn't matter. It's what are you doing? And I talk about this on LinkedIn daily. What are you doing to hustle, get after it? So my story is a blessing because it came out good in that I'm blessed to have a healthy marriage, I have 2 healthy kids, and trying to like rewrite the narrative and give them a better upbringing that I definitely didn't have, and writing a memoir right now. Talk about sharing your story. Like a memoir is a serious way to not only share your story, but that can obviously help with business. People get to know you. You a peek behind the curtain, right? I'm not just a personal injury lawyer. Not just I'm not here to chase ambulances. I'm actually here to help people because I come from very humble beginnings and I've seen homelessness. I've smelled homelessness. From my father. I've seen addiction. I've smelled addiction. So those things make me very sensitive to helping people who need our help. So this is very important work to me, and and that gives me motivation to just grind and just get after it as much as possible.
I'm glad you're writing the memoir for a couple reasons. Number one, it's a gift to the world, but it's a gift to your kids. I talk to, have conversations with my parents, and you hear these stories, and I think in my head, I wish I had that written down. The fact that you're going to write this down, they'll have that, your grandkids, whoever, they'll have that forever and ever. I think that's a really cool idea.
Thanks.
Even if no one reads it, your kids will at least, right?
100%. You just hit the nail on the head. I don't really care. Exactly. That's reason enough. That's you get it. You're your father, right?
Yes.
I remember we talked about this, so you get it. Your father, you're working hard, and you and I, definitely connected on that. So, but that's what it's about, right? Kids, giving them better than we had, and that lights me up.
All right, here's a tough question. This is one that I've thought about. I'm sure you've thought about it. I know your kids are very important to you. I see you post about them, and we're talking about it now. You had a challenging childhood. It led you to the grit and perseverance you have now. Your kids are having a better time than you had, just like mine. How do you instill the grit and perseverance in your kids? How do you balance, hey, I want to give them what I didn't have, with, hey, I also want to give them what I have in terms of the grit?
Yeah, you're not kidding. That's a tough question. So I'll give you an example. So, back in the day, I saw my father in homeless shelters. So my family, on occasion, will go to a homeless shelter and donate food, like that service. So it's like, yeah, my kids have a couple, they have resources, but let's not forget about the community. Let's think about what others don't have. So it's keeping them super humble, like, and hungry, right? Like humble and hungry is my main motivation. But, John Morgan, you can't teach hungry. And I've talked to him about that. And that's it's like, if you have a child who doesn't want to get after it, thankfully my kids evidence to me ambition, right? At least at an early age, but I couldn't teach them to be ambitious, right? So I want to give a book recommendation, a book I read for all the dads. It's called The Daily Dad. And I read one passage a day. It's like, change my approach to parenting. I have a daughter. I recommend another book called Strong Father, Strong Daughter. That to me is my why. So like I look at the early law group as a place to employ great people, provide work. At the end of the day, like to allow me to be with my kids, to give them that. So I think you can't. I agree with John Morgan. You can't teach hungry. And I try not to pressure my kids. So like that book, The Daily Dad, is all about like, hey, if your kid is into like water polo, like invest, do whatever you got to do, support him in water. If you like paper airplanes, like, I read about Will Ferrell. He was into like square dancing or like some weird thing. And his parents were like, go at it. Like, we trust you. And he was like he was like a very high intellect guy. He was capable of such academic achievement, but yet he liked to like square dance or something, some other random thing he was into. They supported that. And that's really cool. So like, I just feel like, very long-winded way, support your kids and then they'll just flourish, I feel like, but that's easier said than done, right? It's hard. You have twins? Do I recall
Twins,
that?
that's right.
Okay.
Girl, boy.
I love it. It's so cool.
It's funny, they came from the same gene pool, but it makes you forgive yourself a little bit because, they came from the same gene pool, but they're completely different.
100%.
So I'm a little bit more forgiving about when one of them acts a certain way or doesn't act a certain way. Like, it's not my fault. They just sort of are who they are.
It's up to twins. That's a cool ride, though. That's a cool ride to be on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's shift back to your firm. So you started just you. Well, you maybe had a short stint with a partner, and then it was you. Take us through sort of how you grew over the years. You got 2 offices now. You didn't get there overnight. Take us through that a little bit.
I'll tell you, it was many years of plateauing. I've only seen rapid growth, I'd say, last 4 or 5 years, right? So for many years, just doing what every lawyer does. I was advertising back in the day in the yellow pages, trying to shout the loudest. I was focused on I was focused on cash too much, making money as opposed to helping people. I was focused on being a taker and not sharing things and not being generous and not thinking long term. So I'd say in the past 5 years, and things were, really growing, right? The income was rising, but I'd say in the past 5 years has been totally different just in terms of, we had like two people, now we're up to, 15. We had one small little office. Now we have a total of, well, three offices. Two were in the same building, but a total of three, and we have people all over the world, helping us. So there's been such growth, but my mindset shifted in like 2019. That's when things changed. But just my point is doing a lot of like boring lawyer stuff that's way too conventional and traditional. You know, average gets you average results, I found. And so I try to like get into big rooms, mastermind rooms, going to conferences, getting coaching. Now I'm fortunate, to be a coach. And so these little things, it's not like I've been crushing it, right? I'm not crushing now, but I'm hungry to crush it. And so the past 5 years, I feel like quick growth, but it wasn't an overnight thing. It took time, right? And I'm always talking about on LinkedIn, you got to just grind. And then sometimes you catch fire and you go, eat, you rise quicker than you were in the past. But I talk about this on LinkedIn today. I think I scheduled a post for tomorrow about you got to keep going. You may look at around and say, I'm not as far along as that attorney. I'm not as accomplished as that attorney. You have to just like do the work. I love what you said earlier about outworking people. Like that's my DNA, like outworking, because you and I will outwork the average person, the average bear. You do that over a long period of time. It just took me longer. It took me into my early 40s to get going. I would encourage the entire audience listening to this. You got to keep plugging. It may come earlier for you or later, like it was for me, but you got to crush it every day. And then I think good things happen.
So let me ask, you said about 4 or 5 years ago is when it really hit. You mentioned a mindset shift. I'm curious if there's anything else. And let me put it in context. I'm an engineer undergrad, so I'm sort of a math guy, one of the math lawyers out there. And I always look at this as an exponential curve. And forever, it barely looks like it's moving. And then all of a sudden, it just starts going up. Is that some of what it is? You just laid the foundation for many years, or was there something that you can point to that says, all right, this is when it really started to change because I did X, Y, and Z?
I think I found in 2018, I found Ben Glass, and that just changed my whole ball game because it opened up so many doors. Again, going to conference, joining a mastermind. I was in 2 masterminds at one point. I think Ben Glass was on my podcast, The Early Show, 2 weeks ago. And I said to him, man, boy, you helped me, And I think when I found him, I was having a crappy day at work. I took the day off. My wife was like, you're not going to work today. What's up with you, man? I said, I'm having a bit, I got to just stay home today. And I started Googling. I don't know what I was Googling, but I found Ben Glass in Virginia. I said to my wife, I think I'm going to go to this conference in DC. I'd never been to a conference. She's like, okay, man, everything, Jonathan, from there, just like mushroom and grew. But I attribute a lot of that wasn't like some random thing. Like I was itching. I was wanting more. The practice was a low 7-figure practice. It was fine, but I was burning out. Just me and an assistant. It wasn't where I wanted it to be. And so you need to, whoever, you are listening, you need to find what lights you up, like we said, right? And I like this conversation you and I are having. That's why when you invited me out, I'm like, hell yeah. Like I like talking to other entrepreneur attorneys. I think it's cool that you're an engineer. Like I don't know a lot of attorneys that are also have an engineer background. It gives you an advantage, a certain analytical advantage coupled with your legal training. That's really cool. But, maybe someone else Ben Glass has resonated with it. It doesn't matter. You could be Joe Schmo, but I feel like you have to be curious. You have to dig and find things that give you energy, right? But it was a long time coming, right? There was a lot of, going from flyers to eventually the income started to rise, able to, no longer living in the studio apartment. We were going on nice Disney trips a lot, right? I was looking for more. And that's when it came about 4 or 5 years ago. And I hope that it just continues. Hope in 4 or 5 years, there's another uptick, right? As you keep going. That's not the end of the story. We're stacking things, cases, right?
Mm-hmm. Ben Glass is awesome. I love it. Total mindset shift from most lawyers, as you know. Most lawyers think the old school, traditional, boring, inside the box ways. And really, Ben Glass is definitely outside the box, and you are too. Early on, you were doing all the legal work. Do you do any legal work now? Or are you a pure CEO at this point?
I've rolled up my sleeves in past couple months, gotten into some cases, but always seeking to delegate the legal work out. I'm trying to do as little as possible because I do enjoy the business side, the CEO side, much more than the technician side, right? And so, yeah, got my hand in a few cases now, but as we scale, hire some more help, going to just remove it as much as I can. Because I would much rather talk to a room of attorneys at a conference than argue in front of a jury. And that's just me. A lot of lawyers may think that's kind of crazy. And, I hear you, but we got to, again, be genuine to who you are. And so I'm trying to lean into exactly who I am, what I want to do. And Ben Glass talks about permission. Ben Glass really descended from Dan Kennedy's school of thought of like, you have permission to do what you want, right? If that's available to you. I'm reading a really good Napoleon Hill book right now, Ladder of Success. Just such interesting stuff. I never heard of Napoleon Hill. Then when I found Ben Glass talking about Think or Rich, I'm like, okay, I'll read this guy. I was like, mind blown.
Yeah.
I know it's exciting. It's fun, man.
See, I'm with you. I like the business. Since a kid, sort of have that entrepreneurial streak. There are lawyers out there that just love trying cases. I mean, I know some, you do too, that are in their 70s and they still want to try cases. I think they're crazy.
Cool.
And they've made so much money they don't need to, but they just love it. That's not me. That's not me. I like building a business. So take us through, you're more the CEO now. Maybe you dabble a little bit, give strategy help on cases. Maybe you dabble a little bit. What's a typical week like for you in the CEO role as you're growing your firm?
Yeah, super structured, time management, near and dear to my heart. If you're an attorney and you're, burning both sides of the candle and you're just stressed out, you got to get your time management on lock. You got to figure out your time. Once I did that, I started to really get intentional, right? About time blocking. So my day is really a lot of visionary stuff. I get to the office 6:15 in the morning. I live an hour away. I get here. That's really what helped me, Jonathan. I started waking up super early. And that really, I started to meditate in the morning, every morning. Getting up early really, I feel like is an advantage. While everyone else is sleeping, you're like scheming your next move, your law.
I am 100% with you there. For me, it started, and let me ask you, my kids were young. That was the only time I had any time for myself. So I had to do it. I started it years ago when they were very young, but I love it. And you're right. You can get so much done when no one else, no one else is awake.
No one else is awake and you're getting ahead, and I think that's a small, but my wife is a night owl. She's highly productive at night. So it's like, you got to just go with your rhythm and what feels natural to you. But that's like my unfair advantage. I'll just wake up earlier than everyone else and just, so probably too early, but so actually, just to get back to your question, just a lot of, the visionary stuff, trying to find speaking opportunities. Like I just reached out to the ABA today about speaking opportunities. Because I think all attorneys, if you're trying to build a business, you should be publicly speaking, networking, shaking hands, giving value, getting in front of an audience when you can. A lot of it is designing systems. They say every time you double in size, your systems break, right? And I feel like that's true. So every time we grow, it's like, oh, we got to figure this problem out. But they're good problems. Because I remember living, again, we were talking about that studio apartment, that fourth floor walk up, was living in a box. Like that was a problem. I'll take these problems any day in terms of designing a system, figuring out a financial situation, right? I'll take it any day, but I just want to impress upon everyone listening, Jonathan, I know you know this, but just to reinforce, like you can have the practice you want. You don't have to be miserable. You don't have, if you're thinking about starting out on your own, well, there's no better time than today, right? So if you're going to do it, I think you just need to jump and do it and go for it. And if that's not you, if you want to work for someone else, all the power to you. But make sure you're working somewhere where you're thriving and they appreciate you, they value you, because there are plenty of employers that will value you, treat you with respect, and let you, enable you to grow. There's no reason to be miserable, right? There's no time. We don't have a lot of time here, so let's just like make the most of it.
Yeah,
that's what I try to do.
Yeah. So you're in growth mode. I love it. I love ambitious lawyers. Here's a question that I wrestle with, and I pose it to a lot of lawyers. When you're in growth mode, you have to balance the investment in the future. You got to spend money now, hoping you get it sometime down the road. How do you approach that issue or problem or whatever you want, challenge, we'll call it, in the growth? Do you have a system? Do you have numbers? How do you approach it?
Yeah, I think you have to be crazy about your numbers. I know you're a real business guy. You have to know the data, the numbers. You have to geek out on the numbers and have nice spreadsheets and figure this stuff out. So I'm always reinvesting into the business, right? I mean, instead of taking the money out, I pour it back in. If, make some money, I'd rather put that towards marketing to make some more money. So increasing the flywheel effect, right? Just continuing to, stoke that fire. That's how I'm looking at this, as an investment. I think the best investment you can make is you. So I say, the best investment that I can make is Chris Earley. He's not going to let himself down. And so just pour into investing. I spend a lot of money, masterminds, coaching, education, right? A lot of just educational resources and just trying to find a little bit of an edge somewhere. Because as you know, personal injuries, especially in Boston, I could throw a football and hit 25 personal injury lawyers right now on the street. I mean, they're everywhere, So it's a crowded space. So I'm not John Morgan, I'm Chris Earley, just trying to make a mark. And so we go back to you have to hustle, do the work. John Morgan had to he's a very inspiring guy. He started with nothing. He comes from a similar background to me. And he and I talk about that in person and on my podcast. Like, he doesn't come from, and there's no silver spoons in his background. He talks about that. The guy's self-made. And I look at him as an example that anything can be possible in this field. And he talked about, every Friday afternoon, he would just go out and network with lawyers. He would treat it like a job. Like, Friday, I'm networking with lawyers, right? We talk about the compounding effect there. You keep doing that and we grow. I'm just into these daily habits, right? Of just a little bit each day. And generally good things have happened. Hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah, I'm with you on the return on any investment you make in yourself is multiples greater, in my opinion, than anywhere else. You have $50,000, you can invest it in the S&P 500 or a bank account or, the treasuries or whatever, and you'll get some return, hopefully, maybe 10%, maybe 15%.
Yep.
You invest in yourself or you invest in your firm, hopefully you're getting a 2, 3, 4, 5 times your investment. And the other thing I like about it is you have some control. You can control your destiny. Huge. Versus someone else controlling 100%. Your destiny.
But that has huge value right there. That's extremely valuable in and of itself. Forgetting about your financial investing into yourself, the fact that you have that autonomy, you can just do whatever you want to do. There's great value, great owner benefit along with that.
Okay, so back to scaling your firm. I tell people, scaling a firm is not easy. In my opinion, I'm sure there'll be people who disagree with this, but in my opinion, getting the clients, that's an easier process than building the right team.
Correct.
What are your thoughts on that? And how have you approached building the right team? How have you found the people, and how do you build the culture at your firm?
Okay, so I just spoke about this in Miami. My speech was called "How to Compete with the 800-Pound Gorilla in Your Market." I talked about hiring, culture, client service, and marketing to your tribe. It's like a 4-pronged. I was just up there sharing. That's another thing, Jonathan. When I share, I tend to just receive. And I would share to give, but so much comes to you. So I encourage the lawyers, don't be a cheapo. Share. I go on LinkedIn and share my stuff because I don't really care, because good things happen. And if I'm helping someone, great. But it definitely is rewarding. So you're right. You can spend money. You get a client today. Okay, it's much harder to get the right team members, because the right team members allows you to have the right culture. The right culture allows you to have the right client service. When you have good client service, it's easier to keep people in the tribe and the herd. You put a fence around your tribe. Once the case ends, they're not going to go call someone else. They're going to call Jonathan, who represented them so well and kick butt for them. They love Jonathan. They're not going anywhere else. And I talked about this last week, is what's the point of getting the case in if the staff isn't right, if the culture's off, if the client service is poor? you got to have that. The house has to be in order, right? The restaurant has to be looking nice and have a nice culture before the customer walks in. Because the customer will be walking in the door tonight at the restaurant. Make sure the table, the linens are nice. The waiter, the wait staff has a smile on their face. People are happy. The food is just out of this world. Even if it's not such great food, the presentation, how they make you feel. Walt Disney, I talk about a lot. He just made people feel so good. They're like, here's my money, take it, I mean, that's the thing. But I agree with you. That's the challenge, the people aspect. Because you can't do anything without the rock stars. You're not going to compete,
And it's tough.
hard.
It's tough. I know it from personal experience, both at this firm, my firm, and then at prior firms. Recruiting people, convincing them to join the team. That's inertia is a very powerful force. And if
Yes.
unless they're really unhappy somewhere, it's hard to get them excited to come to a new place. How do you screen for people? How do you recruit? I know it sounds like values are very important to you. Do you use those as a back to the Dan Kennedy thing? You're both attracting who you want and repelling who you don't want, right?
1,000,000%. You just said it. Everything you just said, 100%. I only want to appeal to like 1% of the job market. And like you said, most of the A players, they're not looking for work. They're taken. They're off the market. So we're trying to find those who are maybe a little unhappy where they are, or they're not working, right? So, I encourage anyone to reach out to me. I'll share with you my job ads. I have job ads for every position. And it's like a dating in the personals. It's super hyper specific. I'm looking for XYZ person. Don't apply if you're not XYZ person. It has our core values. It has our vivid vision. Vivid vision is something I took from Cameron Herold. He started 1-800 Got Junk about where's the business going. So I'm very transparent in my job ad about the core values, who we want, who we don't want. We put our vivid vision. So I want to attract people who are like, well, this guy Early, let me check him out. That resonates with me. I want to go interview. So then when they come in for the interview, it's very unconventional. I'm going to ask you curveball questions, see how you think on your feet. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to see how humble you are. Because I don't want, because you got to remember my upbringing, Jonathan. Like I'm straight up like about as humble as I get because I've seen lives get destroyed. And so it's like I'm very sensitive to not having people who put on airs and think they're better than others. I want humble people who want to serve people at a high level because they value that. It's important to them. And then I want to have my group, my team meet with the person too. Because if the team, stamps, yes, I like this person, they're going to want that person to succeed. They have buy-in. They have invested in this person's success. So we want that existing A player to make our new team member our next A player. And think about, we go back to this flywheel thing. That's what I lean into, right? Because the culture you can't buy. This is the stuff we're talking about right now is all free. It didn't take any money to hire someone. Well, you got to pay them a salary, but to get the right person off the street into your office, sitting in a chair, is free. You just got to like screen them, ask the right questions. And then it's easy to, it's not easy, it's hard as hell, but it's free to build the right culture. That takes time. But everything you're saying is like next level stuff because that's where special law firms operate in that zone of having good culture, good people, good service, raving fans.
And
Things grow.
And piggyback on what you said, you have the rest of your team meet with the potential new team member. That's huge. As A players want to work with other A players, you bring a C player in, it's not a 1+1 or 1-1. It's a 1-3 because that C player or D player then infects everybody else. And then they're like, get rid of this person. So it's hugely important. And it seems to me there are a lot of law firm leaders who just, I don't know if they're not keyed into it or they just ignore it. I don't know what it is, but it's hugely important.
Oh, it's critical because your staff will resent you if you hold on to that team player who's clearly not pulling their weight. They're going to resent. They may leave because of that, because you're not walking the walk. You're settling for status quo, right? And I think that's detrimental. I said this last week in that presentation. This is my test. If a team member is working out or not, I ask myself, would I re-enthusiastically rehire this person if I had the opportunity? That is a litmus test to tell you if you made a mistake or if you did not. Right? You got to live with that decision. If you think you made a mistake, you have to do the right thing and set them free where they can thrive somewhere. And if you have the right hire, then pour in, invest, give them resources, educate, train them up, to be the best possible team member. And if they leave, that's okay, because like they're better than, I hope better than they were when they entered our space here. But like I can't make you stay, right? I can't control that. I would encourage all the lawyers, listening to this. Even if you're not a lawyer, like you can't control what you cannot control. So keep it, lawyers are, no matter what kind of work you're doing, people will drive you crazy, your staff, your clients. Like worry about what you can control and let everything else go. That's out of your sphere of influence, your sphere of control. That's been helpful for me as I've got a little bit older.
Yeah, that's good.
At the law firm GC, our team of experienced attorneys provides knowledgeable legal counsel for businesses of all sizes. Founded by Jonathan Hawkins, our firm specializes in corporate law, real estate, litigation, and more. To learn how we can become your trusted legal advisors, visit www.yourlawfirmgc.com and schedule a free consultation today. The law firm GC. Law done right.
So I want to shift now to I'll call it your marketing stack. And I was poking a little bit, but it's true. You seem to be everywhere all at once, and you do a lot of different stuff. I think your LinkedIn posts are great. I encourage everybody to follow you there if they're not already. You are a columnist for maybe one or two publications. I want you to go through this in a minute, but let me tee it up for you. You've got a weekly email to lawyers. I think you've got another weekly email to clients. Maybe you have another weekly email for something else. You go to events. You got a podcast. You've got all sorts of stuff. So take us through some of that. If I'm a new lawyer or a new law firm owner, I look at what Chris Earley is doing, and I am intimidated as hell. I'm like, there's no way I'll ever be able to do this. And I guess the first thing is, you didn't do all of this all at once overnight, did you? Take us through how this happened, right?
No, but like, I gotta be real with you. Like, I'm not like, I passed the bar in the first try, but I didn't go to like some elite law school, like just like a normal dude. But we keep going back. It's like you and I are like, did you have a paper? Were you a paper boy back in the day by chance or no?
No, but I've got a funny story. I've got a pretty funny one. I don't know if we'll waste time today, but I've got a pretty good one.
No.
Yeah. I'll tell you real quick. Basically, so I remember as a kid, I wanted a telephone in my room, and my parents were like, no, you do not get a telephone in your room. And back then I was a Cub Scout, and I don't know if you were a Cub Scout, but on the back of, they had this magazine, they had this ad, I can't remember what it was, like a wrapping paper thing. You could sell wrapping paper door to door for prizes. And one of the prizes was this telephone that was shaped like a football. It was an NFL football phone. And I sent in a postcard. I didn't tell my parents. I sent in a postcard. They sent me the catalog. I went door to door through the neighborhood, and I sold enough to where I could get the phone. And then, got all the stuff, delivered it, got the money, got the phone, all that stuff. And then the phone came in the mail. I was so happy. I was like, so triumphant. I went to my parents. I was like, I've got a phone, and it's going in my room.
It's a football phone.
It's a football phone. And they just sort of chuckled, and they said, well, we're not going to put a phone jack in your room, so have fun.
That makes it tricky. There are no cell phones. But I relate to you because you're a doer, man, right? So I guess I asked you that. I mentioned that because like all the stuff you just mentioned isn't like very exotic stuff. It's just like I just asked the ABA, can I write for you? They said yes. Mass Lawyers Weekly, they said yes. Nothing like fancy or nothing very intricate here that I'm doing, right? But very intentional. Like on the flight down to Miami last week, I wrote two ABA articles, just pumping out. I've learned, Dan Kennedy, Ben Glass, done is better than perfect. I also learned from Dan Kennedy, you got to have like lines in the water. We just put up a series of billboards around Boston. We're doing, email newsletter, just about anything under the sun. Going to do some buses, just anything that we can do to get our name out there. LinkedIn, right? But these things, it wasn't overnight. There's a lot of, action behind the scenes. There's a lot of struggle, man. I know you know that. I feel like more times than not, I'm getting punched in the face. But I'm too dumb to quit. I'm so deep. It's like, what am I going to do? Like wrap it up and just circle the wagons? It's like, no, you keep going.
Well, it's, the story of the overnight success, right? That's
100%. Yeah. But like those things you just mentioned, those columns and the podcasts, like anyone could do that stuff. You just got to like, just do it. And like, I just let stuff fly, man. I don't really care. I put something on LinkedIn. It's like, is this like a little bit too vulnerable? I'm like, screw it. Then I'm like, oh my God, this hit some people. That's nice.
So plug your podcast real quick. so people
Yeah.
can find it and listen. I think it's great. So I want other folks to hear it. You got great guests that, similar to this, y'all are spewing some great knowledge about building firms and operating firms. So yeah, tell folks.
No, I appreciate it. It's called The Early Show. So my name, I really leverage that. So I think you need to brand yourself, however that is, right? Lawyers should be branding themselves. So it's called The Early Show. And I always have lawyers who have had struggle. They're all mostly personal injury entrepreneurs who have been through some struggle. We had Mike Morse from Fireproof. I'm trying to think. John Morgan, obviously, he was the first one. We've had a series of, Alexander Shinara, right? We're going to be reaching out to him. Just like some people who started with very little, because that resonates with me, because we have like Ryan McKean, a friend of mine from Connecticut, had $100 million verdict. Like, he's the most humble dude you're going to meet. So I love to hear about and talk with these lawyers about how they got over, how they flex those resiliency muscles. And just, I love that stuff because it's inspiring to me and it's inspiring to others. But I appreciate that. Yeah, The Early Show, we're always, Ben Glass, like I said, was on recently, Jennifer Gore Cuthbert, just a bunch of people getting after. We just try to provide value to people.
You do have a great name. I did see the billboard, a picture that you posted on LinkedIn. So what's the tagline? Say it.
Call early before it's too late.
That's great. I love it. That is great. So plug your weekly email for lawyers too. So how can people sign up for that?
I think you're on that, right?
I am.
Get that?
I'm on that. Yeah.
So again, just giving value and showing up. And so once a week, it's called This Week's Needs No Practice Tip. Because again, I'm a nerd. I like talking about this stuff, and I'll share. Hey, I just learned this thing from this book, or I just learned something. And it's all about, trying to just push the needle, help move the needle in some way in someone's practice. If it helps, great. If not, well, we're trying. But that's like on lock. Like that's we added you recently. That's just like every week. There's no like missed weeks, right? Like the ABA, I don't just like take a few months, like every single month, write that. Early Show, we have like a few episodes each month. So like repetition is your ally, your best bet. And so those a lot of the stuff we do, but it's if I can do this, man, anybody can. There's nothing really highly cerebral about this activity. It's just like rolling up your sleeves, very kind of blue collar approach. It's like do the work, roll up your sleeves and break a sweat.
I'm a big believer in consistency. The other thing my approach is, willpower. Well, I'll go back. Inertia is a very powerful force. You got to use willpower to get started. And I think a lot of folks can't overcome that initial resistance. And for me,
why do you think?
Who knows? For me, and I'm like everybody else. There are things that when I first started doing the podcast, I'm sort of like, all right. So for me, I just have to take a couple steps, and then that creates some momentum, and then I can start going. The other thing that helps me is, and you sort of mentioned it, is the consistency, but make it a habit. If it's more of a habit, then it's, and I'm sort of the old Seinfeld thing where you check the box every day. I'm a huge check the box kind of guy. I like to have this streak that I don't break, and I don't want to break it. So I think that's huge. So a couple other things. I know you're going to have to run here in a minute. We're talking some fairly sophisticated stuff you do and some higher investment and time and things you do. But let's go back to some of the old school things that I know you're really good at. And that's meeting in person with lawyers. I see you post on LinkedIn all the time about meeting folks for coffee or whatnot. And, early in my career, that's how I built a practice. And I know folks out there who they don't speak, they don't have emails, they don't do anything. They have built their entire practice by taking people to lunch and breakfast.
Love it.
That's all they do. So tell us about sort of your habit or how you got into that and how often do you do it during the week?
I would encourage everyone to read Never Eat Alone. Really good book. I think John Morgan suggested it to me. I read it. It's a thick book. It's totally worth it. Never Eat Alone. That changed my whole mindset when it comes to networking and being a giver. So, what I do is take the week off between Christmas and New Year's. I have a think week and I design the goals. So one of my goals this year is to do a certain amount of podcasts, do a certain amount of client appreciation parties, and specifically doing a certain amount of attorney meetups. So I track that. So I want to meet about 150 lawyers, either virtually or in person. So what gets measured gets done, right? So I track that militantly. All right, I track how many reviews we're getting. Everything is tracked, so it gets done. But those coffee meetups, I first started doing it. It was like, my wife years ago was like, man, you got to get out. You got to get out there. I'm like, no, get the business going to come to me. Well, the business didn't come to me. So I had to like hunt it down, be a hunter, because that's what we are. And so I would encourage you, I prefer coffee. It's a little faster, and it's no less valuable. So yeah, I'll take a picture on LinkedIn and, hey, like, can I tag you? Oh, sure. Put the person, promote them. Hey, here's a real estate lawyer I met. Here's a criminal defense lawyer I met. Connect with, get up with him or her, right? But that hits a lot of people. And so we're just trying to, leverage our assets. You and I are very high on LinkedIn. You're always you have a massive audience. I'm trailing behind you. I'm trying. But like, everyone listening should be on LinkedIn and posting content, right? It's free. You could spend $60, whatever, a month premium, but like, you're hitting so many. I did a post like a few months ago. It hit, I don't know, it was massive, right? You never know when you're going to pop. You know that, right?
Yeah.
You put a lot of stuff out there. You never know. You may think, this isn't too good, but like, anyone can do it. If you're in law school, start pumping out content, connect with people. Like you said, have coffee with lawyers. So again, I hate to say it again, what gets measured gets done. You have to meet people. Don't make it all about you. It's like, oh, here, Jonathan, let me just talk about myself for 30 minutes. Like, no, let's have it. Like, how can I tell me about your practice? What's a good referral for you? Where are you from? You have kids, you're married, like learning about the person. And I'll send them a book. Like, I just met with a real estate lawyer the other day, and I'm yesterday, and I sent her a book on Amazon that we talked about, right? Just like trying to give a little bit of value and show some that was listening to you. We had a good conversation. And books are sticky, right? They're hard to throw away. So little things like that, but you have to get after it. Seth Price. Seth Price?
Not personally, but yes.
Okay. He talks about nothing good happens behind a computer screen.
That's right.
Get outside. You got to get outside. You got to shake hands. Pandemic's over.
Lawyers tend to be hesitant to do it, and early on, you mix in people with people you don't know. You got to get new people in there, and
Yes.
it's dating. I mean, you're going to kiss a lot of frogs. I've had some extremely painful meetups, I'll call it, that I was, I should have done the coffee so I could get out of there quicker. We've got a little bit of time left. So a couple things. So I know you also coach attorneys. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, just like a little side thing I started. I enjoy this stuff, and it lights me up. As I said, it gives me energy. So I like helping other lawyers. I've got a lot of irons in the fire, so I can't do it a whole lot. But it's really for attorneys between, say, $500 to $1 million in revenue, personal injury lawyer. They're looking to break to the next level, right? To notch up, to scale. That's my avatar coaching client, right? But I probably do it for free. I really enjoy it. But that's something I'm doing, and just that starts relationships. That could create referrals, cross referrals back and forth. You just never know. This is a relationship business, right? And like, this isn't transactional where personal injury client, checks in the bank, like, done. It's like, people need to get sensitive. Lawyers need to be sensitive. It's about relationships. That's why I'm writing a book, is to like deepen authentic relationships and create more authentic relationships. Like, sharing your story is super deep. So I'd encourage anyone. I don't care. Maybe hopefully it doesn't have the sadness like mine does, but like, just let it rip, share your story, be authentic, create relationships, and help people out. And you're gonna kick butt. Yeah, there's no question. I know from experience, because you're kicking butt. You and I are very much aligned on that.
So there's another thing we have in common. I can't stop this conversation without asking you about your drumming. You're a drummer, right?
Are you a drummer?
I am.
I'm so bad, man.
I don't get to play much. I have a set. I'm busy. Probably you too. I'd be pretty bad now too, but I love it. I love music. Love drumming. So
I love it. I love percussion, man. I always have.
Did you play growing up? When did you start?
Not really. I'm kind of new to it. I'm like, I got my set in the pandemic. How about you?
I grew up playing. I got my first set maybe in 6th grade. Played a little.
You're not messing around.
Well, it sounds more impressive than probably it is. In high school we had a band, and we played originals, and that was sort of the the Seattle alternative days.
Cool.
So it's fun. And then college played. So I don't have anybody to play with and don't have the time, but still have my set. I try to get my kids, either one of them, just to be interested in it, and neither one of them are, right?
Really? Does it drive your family crazy because it's so loud, or no?
Yes. So I have some pads and some
Oh.
things that keep it quiet, but yes,
I get it.
you know, God bless my parents. You know, being the drummer, that's where the band would often practice. Everybody came to our house and it was just, you know, we were jamming. It was fun.
Play some Soundgarden or Pearl Jam or something.
Yeah. So
I love it.
a couple things. I know you got to go, but I know, again, family's really big and important to you. How do you balance your family life and growing this firm? That's a big issue probably for a lot of folks. I know you got big dreams for the firm, but you also, family's important to you. How do you balance the two?
Everything. Time management, man. There's a time to work and there's a time, like, I'm not going to be on email tonight, you know, when I get home. I'll be home at 5:00. So I get in super early. As I said, I get home early. So my kids are growing up fast. You know how it is. The days are short. I'm sorry, the days are long. The years, they just fly by. And so my kids are growing up. So I designed this thing, Jonathan, so that I'm not working crazy hours and not killing myself. I'll hustle and work my butt off, but I'm not killing myself. I'm not here till 10:00 at night. I'm at sleep at 8:00 actually, and I'm hanging with my family, you know. And I've learned that, like, even if your kids are on their phone and they're, like, you know, maybe not listening to you, they're picking up what you're putting down. So I try to pick up myself, you know, when I'm with them, because they know they're always watching. Kids are watching, right? You know that, right? As a dad, they're always listening, always watching, because I know what it's like not to have that advantage of, not even advantage, just like what you should expect from a dad. So try to lead into that. But I leave the office every day at 4 because, like, this stuff gets done. There's time management, there's delegation. I could go out, we could talk for 20 hours, me and you. We could really cut this up, you know, because we're both into this. But you got to get your time management house in order, because otherwise that's a recipe for disaster. That's step A, I feel. Step 1, time management. Then you work your way away from, you know, you got to delegate stuff, work your way out of the weeds, get off of email. Don't take, you know, unscheduled phone calls, stuff like that frees you up. And that's what we should be doing as entrepreneurs, right? High level stuff that again, I hate to say, lights us up.
Yeah, I'm with you. I took off early 3 days this
Awesome.
week for basketball games. So
Awesome.
you know, I want to make sure I'm there. So I know your time, I think we're up. So, you know, tell the audience how they can find you, how to get in touch with you. Best way.
Yeah, just I appreciate it. I'm on LinkedIn, easy to find there. Our website's earlylawgroup.com. Reach out to me. I always say, Jonathan, like, you know, if you have a question, something that's tripping you up, I'm no expert here whatsoever, but I'll talk, and I like this stuff. So I would love to hear from you. So reach out to me, and let's try to help each other, start a relationship, and see what we could do to potentially help each other out. And let's grow together, you know. But I love what you're doing. It's a really good podcast. So I'm flattered you even asked me to be on. I appreciate it. Just keep doing your thing, man. I like what you're doing. I'm vibing to it. So
Well,
keep going.
Thanks for coming on. And everybody, it's Early. It's Ley, not Ly. So
Exactly. That's it.
all right. Well,
Call it
cool.
early before it's too late.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.yourlawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.